began with the silence, an unnatural kind that doesn't belong to the mountains. No insects, no wind, not even the whisper of leaves brushing together. Just stillness so deep it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. Deputy Marlowe Jennings didn't notice it at first. He thought the quiet was peaceful, until he realized it meant he wasn't alone. He'd come up the ridge alone, miles beyond the patrol routes, looking for a hiker who'd gone missing 3 days ago. The woman's last message had been a blurry image of a cabin roof barely visible through the trees. She'd written, "I think I found something." Then nothing after that. The ridge wasn't supposed to exist. On every county map, the area was blank. No roads, no trails, just forest, steep and ancient, the kind that grows in on itself until light has to fight its way through. Marlowe's GPS had stopped working an hour earlier, compass too. Still, he pushed forward. The cabin appeared just as the sun began to die behind the ridge, the light turning everything a bruised shade of orange. It leaned into the hillside, built from blackened timber and nailed shut with thick iron bars. Someone had carved symbols into the door circles and lines, repeated over and over again. Marlowe thought they looked almost like tally marks, but there were too many to count. He tried the door. Locked. When he pressed his ear against it, he swore he heard a faint sound from inside. Not movement, not breathing, something softer. A hum. A low, steady hum, like a song without words. He called out, "Hello? Anyone in there?" No answer. Only the hum, just a little louder now. He circled the cabin. The back wall had collapsed, exposing a narrow path that led downhill into what looked like a sinkhole. It wasn't natural. The dirt was packed tight, the walls reinforced with wooden beams. The path went deep, too deep for any settler's storage cellar. The air grew colder as he descended. The smell hit him before he saw anything sweet and sour, like meat left out too long. He gagged, but kept moving, his flashlight trembling in his hand. At the bottom of the passage, the tunnel opened into a room. His beam caught a dozen figures sitting perfectly still along the walls. For a heartbeat, he thought they were alive people, huddled together in silence. Then the light settled on their faces. Wax. They were wax. But the closer he got, the less certain he was. The eyes looked too real. The lips, too detailed. And the smell wasn't wax. It was decayed. He stumbled back, the beam swinging wildly. That's when he noticed the floor. Carvings everywhere, rows of names burned into the wood. Some so old, they were barely legible. But one caught his eye. Jennings. He froze. Behind him, the hum stopped. Something moved in the tunnel. A slow shuffle, like bare feet, dragging against the dirt. Marlowe swung the light, his heart hammering so hard he thought it would burst. The beam caught a figure at the far end of the tunnel. Tall, thin, skin gray like wet stone. It moved awkwardly, like the joints didn't fit together right. "Stop right there," Marlowe shouted, his voice cracking. The thing stopped. Its head tilted, neck jerking in short, unnatural angles. Then it spoke, not loud, not clear, but soft. "You came back." Marlowe stumbled backward until he hit the wall. The light shook across the creature's face, its mouth stitched shut except for a single tear at the corner, where black saliva dripped down its chin. Its chest moved with every ragged breath, ribs pressing against skin that looked paper thin. "What are you?" The creature took another step forward. The sound of its bones creaked like breaking branches. "Family," it whispered. Marlowe fired. The gun's blast filled the chamber, echoing endlessly. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing, just the hollow tunnel stretching into darkness. He backed toward the exit, breathing hard, every instinct screaming at him to run. He made it halfway up the incline before he tripped on something buried in the dirt. A photograph, old, cracked. He brushed it clean. The image was faded, but he could see faces of family lined up in front of the same cabin. The name scrawled beneath, it read, The Harkers, 1892, and there, standing among them, was a man who looked exactly like him. He dropped the photo and scrambled up the tunnel, gasping when he burst into open air. The forest was pitch black now, the last light gone. But something was wrong. The cabin's door was open. The symbols were gone, scraped clean from the wood. Inside, the hum started again. It was louder this time, hundreds of voices layered together in a single vibrating tone. Marlowe took a step back, his flashlight flickering. From inside the doorway, shapes began to move, pale, human shapes dragging themselves toward the light. He ran. Branches tore at his clothes, the ground swallowing his boots with every step. He didn't stop until he reached the ridge road, headlights flickering through the trees. He waved his arms, screaming for help, but when the truck pulled up, the driver just stared. "Mister," the man said, "you shouldn't be here. Ain't been no houses up that ridge for 50 years. Marlowe turned to look back. The forest was still. No cabin, no light. No sound, just trees, endless and silent. He tried to explain, tried to tell them what he'd seen, but when he looked down at his hands, the flashlight was gone and in its place. His palms were covered in black wax, still warm, still dripping. He didn't go back right away. He told himself he wouldn't, that what he saw had been nothing more than exhaustion and bad light. But nights in town became unbearable. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the hum. Not in his ears, behind his ribs, inside his skull. Vibrating softly, like something alive. 3 days later, Marlowe was back at the sheriff's station, staring at the file cabinet. He found nothing. No Harkers, no missing family, no records of settlements on that ridge. But in the oldest logbook, dated 1903, he found a single entry under property complaints. Harker Hollow ex-Hivy noted. Sounds at night. Livestock missing. Investigation aborted. The signature beneath the report was faint. But it was the same name, Jennings. He left that night before the storm rolled in, not telling anyone where he was going. The forest swallowed him fast, rain tapping against his jacket. Flashlight beam cutting a weak path through fog. The GPS still refused to work, but his body seemed to remember the way. Each turn, each incline, every shadow that felt just a little too familiar. The ridge looked different this time. No cabin, no door, just a clearing where the air felt wrong, thicker, colder. He found the spot where the sinkhole had been, but the ground there had healed. Covered by moss and fallen leaves, as if decades had passed overnight. He should have turned back. Instead, he knelt down and began to dig. The dirt came up in clumps, wet and heavy, a few inches deep. His hand struck wood. He brushed it clean, an old trapdoor, its surface scarred with knife marks. He pried it open, and the smell hit him again. That same sweet rot. He climbed down with his flashlight clenched between his teeth. The tunnel hadn't changed. The carvings, the packed walls, even the faint vibration in the air, were all still there, waiting. Only now, the names on the floor had multiplied, hundreds more, all burned into the wood. And near the center, the freshest one, M. Jennings. His hands trembled. "No," he whispered. A voice from the dark answered him. "It's already done." The light caught the edge of a doorway that hadn't been there before. Beyond it, a faint orange glow flickered. He followed it, step by step, until he entered a massive chamber hollowed from the earth. Dozens of shapes stood in rows, heads bowed, humming softly. The sound filled the space like static. Marlowe tried to speak, but his voice broke apart in his throat. Then one of the figures looked up. Their faces were human, but wrong, the eyes too deep, the skin pale and stretched thin as parchment. None of them moved like living people. They swayed slightly, like puppets waiting for strings to tighten. And at the far end of the chamber stood something tall and motionless, half buried in the wall, a massive wooden effigy carved into the shape of a man. Nails pinned its limbs to the clay, and from its mouth spilled a dark resin that glistened under the light. He realized with horror that the wax from his hands was the same. One of the figures stepped forward, a woman, thin and hunched, her hair hanging in wet clumps. Her face was familiar, too familiar. He'd seen her photo on the missing persons poster back at the station. "The hiker, help me," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, cracking. "It makes us sing." Before Marlowe could move, her head jerked to the side like something had yanked her by invisible threads. Her eyes rolled white. The hum grew louder, deeper. The others joined in, swaying faster now, voices blending into that same endless tone. The wooden effigy began to move. Slowly, impossibly. Its head turned toward him. Its jaw cracked open, spilling more of the black wax that hissed as it hit the floor. The air grew thick, vibrating with the sound of grinding wood and shifting earth. Marlowe fired again and again, bullets thudding uselessly into the effigy's chest. The humming didn't stop. The figures were closing in now, faces twitching in rhythm with the sound. He ran. His light swung wildly, catching glimpses of faces, some human, some not. A man with his mouth sewn shut, a child with too many teeth, a woman whose eyes glowed faintly like embers. The deeper he ran, the older everything looked, bones packed into the walls, roots fused with rib cages, the air alive with whispering. He found another passage and crawled through, dragging himself upward until the dirt gave way to stone steps. He climbed, choking on dust, until he hit a wooden door. He pushed it open and fell out into open air. He was standing on a slope overlooking the valley. The rain had stopped, the sky bruised purple with dawn. The clearing below was empty, no cabin, no hole, just forest. But something was different. Smoke, thin threads rising from the trees, curling into the air. Then he saw them, scattered lights flickering between the trunks. Lanterns, dozens of them, and shapes moving slowly beneath, carrying something wrapped in canvas. A burial, or a feeding. Marlowe raised his binoculars, hands trembling. The figures below were human, but they moved in perfect unison, their faces obscured by rags. At the front of the line walked a tall man holding a wooden staff carved with crosses. The man stopped, lifted his head, and looked straight toward Marlowe's hill. The distance should have been too far, but somehow, even from there, Marlowe saw the man's face clearly and felt his blood turn to ice. It was his own face, older, hollow, smiling. The wind shifted. The hum began again, faint at first, then growing louder until the trees themselves seemed to vibrate. Marlowe stumbled back, ears ringing, as the shapes below turned their heads in unison, all looking up at him. He ran until the sound faded, until the forest thinned and the road appeared again. By the time he reached his truck, his flashlight was dead and his ears were bleeding. He didn't look back, but as he drove, he saw something in the rearview mirror, the faint outline of a figure sitting in the back seat, watching him with a face that wasn't quite his anymore. He slammed the brakes, turned, and the seat was empty. Only the smell remained, wax and soil. When he made it to town, the sheriff's office was dark. The power had gone out hours earlier, and the rain had flooded half the roads. He went straight to his desk, pulled out a blank incident report, and began to write everything, every word. But when he finished and turned the page, he saw something already written in the margins, words carved deep into the paper like they'd been burned in. "We keep the blood alive, asterisk." The rain didn't stop for 3 days after Marlowe wrote his report. The valley flooded, power lines dropped, and the station generator hummed like a nervous heart. He didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the handwriting burned into the page. "We keep the blood alive." By the 4th night, he began to notice things in town that hadn't been there before. Old houses with their windows nailed shut, lanterns in the distance that no one admitted to lighting, a song on the wind, faint and wordless. Weaving through the static of his radio, he drove to the records office at dawn, hoping to find anything about the ridge. The clerk on duty was half asleep, the kind of man who'd worked there too long to care. When Marlowe asked about the Harker name, the man's face went still. "Where'd you hear that?" Marlowe showed him the photo. The man stared for a long time, then unlocked a drawer no one had touched in years. Inside was a thin folder bound with red tape. The label had faded, but Marlowe could still read the words burned into the paper. Relocation Project Harker Hollow, 1954. He opened it. Inside were aerial photos, dozens of them, showing a small settlement in the valley, half hidden by trees. Then the later images. The same area burned flat, black smoke spiraling into the sky. Typed beneath one photo were 4 words. Containment successful. All accounted for. All accounted for, Marlowe repeated. Then who's up there now? The clerk didn't answer. He just closed the drawer, pale and silent. "If you found that place," he said quietly, "you'll leave it buried." Marlowe left the office with the folder tucked under his coat. He knew what he had to do by the time he reached the ridge again. Fog had rolled down from the peaks, thick enough to erase the world beyond 10 feet. The road ended sooner than he remembered. A chain of rusted fence posts marked the border of government land. A warning sign hung sideways, half swallowed by ivy. Property of U.S. Research Division 12. He cut through the fence. The forest was silent except for the slow creak of branches. The air smelled of wet iron. Half a mile in, he found them, the lanterns. Dozens of them, swaying from the trees, just like before. But they weren't lit by fire. Each held a faint blue glow, pulsing like breath. Beneath them lay symbols carved into the ground, circles intersecting circles. Each one filled with ashdot. He followed the pattern deeper into the woods, until it ended at a ridge of black stone. A doorway had been carved into the rock, marked with the same symbols he'd seen on the cabin's door. A faint hum drifted from within. He stepped through. Inside, the air was colder than winter. The tunnel walls were lined with wooden slats, each carved with names. He shone his light across them: Harker, Jennings, Adley, Pike, hundreds of surnames, all belonging to families that had lived in the valley. At the end of the passage waited another chamber. He recognized it instantly. The effigy was gone, but the outline remained a hollow in the clay shaped like a man with outstretched arms. In its place stood a stone altar covered in moss. On it rested a single lantern. When he lifted it, the hum stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against his chest. And then a voice, right behind him. "You were never meant to leave." He turned. The woman from the chamber, the missing hiker, stood in the doorway, eyes dark and hollow. Her voice wasn't her own. It carried the weight of many. "They tried to burn us out," she said. "They thought fire could end what's older than fire. But the blood remembers." Marlowe raised the lantern higher. "What are you?" She stepped closer. "We were the first who stayed when the mountain changed its skin. We learned its song, and now it's teaching you." He backed toward the wall, but the stone felt warm beneath his hand, alive, pulsing faintly. He looked down. The veins of the rock glowed the same color as the lantern's light. The hum returned, faint at first, then rising, vibrating through his bones. The woman's face began to flicker, her features shifting between others, the sheriff, the clerk, strangers from the photographs, until finally it became his own. He dropped the lantern. It shattered, spilling light across the floor. The humming stopped. When the glow faded, he was alone. The chamber was empty, the doorway gone. Only the carvings on the walls remained, and one new name freshly cut among them: Marlowe Harker. He woke at dawn on the roadside, mud streaked across his uniform. His truck was gone, the folder too, but in his hand, he still held a scrap of paper, folded tight. He opened it. Inside was a photograph, the same one from before, The family in front of the cabin, only now, there was a new figure among them. Him. The next week, the county filed his disappearance. Search parties combed the ridge, but found nothing. The ground there had caved in, swallowing what was left of the forest. Officials blamed it on erosion. Locals stopped going near that part of the mountain. But some nights, when fog rolls low through the valley, hikers say they hear it again, that low hum rising from the hollow. They say lights still move among the trees, carrying lanterns that burn with cold blue fire. And if you follow the sound long enough, you might find a cabin that isn't on any map. Inside, a single photograph waits on the table. Every year, there's one more face in it. Asterisk, if you ever find yourself driving through the Appalachians at night, and your radio cuts out for no reason, listen carefully. If you hear a low hum under the static, don't try to find where it's coming from. Don't stop. Don't look for the light between the trees. Some stories aren't lost, they're waiting. The Harker bloodline was never about one family. It was about everyone who thought the mountain could be tamed. If you felt the air change while listening, that's just the way the hollow remembers names. It whispers them back when someone speaks them aloud. Share this story if you still believe legends begin somewhere real. Follow 4 more places the map forgot, more files that should have stayed sealed, and more echoes that refuse to die. Until next time, keep your lantern lit, keep the road in sight, and never, ever answer the hum.